Well, James, do you fancy a new job?
Yes. Yeah. Anything.
Fox is advertising for, now wait for it, Chief World Cup Watcher. I think that's right up your street.
Well, yeah, I'm in for that. What are they paying? Do you know?
$50,000. That's to watch all 104 matches over the 39 days. So about $480 a game. Not bad.
Yeah, David, I think I'd do it for, never mind 50,000, I'd do it for 5.
I'll write you a reference.
But I tell you what, though, I would pay them $50,000 if I could watch Scotland win the World Cup. You think that could be arranged?
You might have to fork out more for that. I'm David Blevins in the Trump 100 studio in Washington, D.C.
And I'm James Matthews, just down the road from you, David. It's been quite the day at the White House. The president, who's got quite a lot on his plate, still found time to ask a child in the Oval Office, do you think you could take me in a fight?
Only a question Donald Trump could ask. He's bringing back fitness programs for children. The MAHA movement has plans for today's youth, making America healthy again. Meanwhile, the president, his Secretary of State, and his so-called Secretary of War all talk Iran on Tuesday. It was Marco Rubio, though, that stood out on this day of press conferences. Did he just become the front runner for Republican nominee in the 2028 presidential election?
And Donald Trump and those cognitive tests, that's a story that isn't going away. He tells us he's had 3 of them, and he's given us the results, which may not surprise.
James, we'll get on to how well you'd fare at the presidential fitness test in a moment. But first, we've had 3 press conferences today, led by 3 different members of the administration, all talking Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. In the morning, it was Pete Hegseth, the man who calls himself Secretary of War. He acknowledged recent missile, drone and small boat attacks, but the Pentagon says they haven't reached the threshold of a return to major combat operations and that the ceasefire is intact.
We expected there would be some churn at the beginning, which happened. And we said we would defend and defend aggressively, and we absolutely have. Iran knows that. And ultimately, the president's going to make a decision whether anything were to escalate into a violation of a ceasefire. But certainly we would urge Iran to be prudent in the actions that they take to keep that underneath this threshold.
The oldest question of all at the Pentagon briefing was about dolphins. Yes, you heard that right, dolphins. On reports that the Iranians are training them to carry mines and attack ships, Hegseth replied,
and I can't confirm or deny whether we have kamikaze dolphins, but I can confirm they don't.
Next up, we had the president himself in the Oval Office. School children were attending what was a relaunch of this fitness test. I have to say, David, I don't know what you thought, but Donald Trump, he looked incredibly bored as he held court for more than an hour. And that was mirrored by some of the kids who were yawning at some point. But I suspect they rather jumped to attention when he broke the news to them that Iran had been 2 weeks away from killing them.
We would have had an Iran with a nuclear weapon, and maybe we wouldn't all be here right now. I can tell you the Middle East would have been gone, Israel would have been gone, and they would have trained their sights on Europe first and then us.
The president said Iran was playing games, described recent attacks as Iran firing with pea shooters, and then acted out with great flair the role of both sides in those scenarios in the Strait of Hormuz.
They were warned, and they said, go back now, go back right now. You will be shot at within 10 seconds. Yes, I am going back to Iran. I am going back. And that was the end of that, right? He went.
So that was the morning, the president and Pete Hegseth. The star of the show, though, on Tuesday had to be the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Quite the performance in the press briefing room. He was doing maternity cover for Caroline Levitt. Of course, she's away having a baby. And I wondered, David, if we saw his first very public and very determined bid to be the next president of the United States.
Yes, in Caroline Leavitt's absence, the Secretary of State had his audition of sorts at the podium in the White House briefing room. He said the US was the only nation with the power to secure the navigation routes of the Strait of Hormuz. He also said Project Freedom, that's the project we talked about in the last episode, was a defensive effort, not an offensive move by the US military.
Now, what's really important for you to report and for everyone to understand is this is not an offensive operation. This is a defensive operation. And what that means is very simple. There's no shooting unless we're shot at first. Okay? We're not attacking them. But if they're attacking us or they're attacking a ship, you need to respond to that.
He was also asked, James, about the terms of the ceasefire and said that the time had come for Iran to make a sensible choice to listen and agree to America's demands and let their ships pass through the strait. Now, should the Iranians ignore those requests, he also pointed out that the US would retaliate.
Yeah, David, I was down at the White House and Rubio, he spoke of civilians trapped, didn't he? Staff members on ships in the Strait of Hormuz, thousands of them. He called Iran's blockade desperate and destructive. And for me, in common with Hegseth, actually, he presented America's action now as almost a benevolent humanitarian gesture, very much emphasizing its defensive nature as they would have it. And I do think we see an administration which is reframing its involvement as it appeals for international help to break the impasse. It's becoming a consistent message of late from the Americans, this call for other countries to engage in diplomacy. The US now, of course, pushing a resolution to the UN Security Council looking for diplomatic support. And tell me, David, I don't know if they have this phrase in Northern Ireland, but they certainly do in Scotland. You couldn't burn his neck with a blowtorch.
The only similar phrase I can think of in Ireland is, you couldn't beat him with a big stick.
Well, same meaning, I think. But, Marco Rubio, he invoked international law. Now, bearing in mind that critics would accuse the Americans of absolutely flouting international law when it comes to its military action in Iran, he said that, look, this is an international waterway, the Strait of Hormuz, therefore international law should apply. Part of the wider context of America's appeal for help, actually. And that wasn't all. I mean, this appeal to the UN Security Council and its member countries, Rubio did pose the question, what's the UN worth if it can't, help out in this situation? Well, America has had a bad habit of knocking the United Nations, undermining its credibility and authority. For Rubio now to come calling and indeed crawling when America needs the United Nations, I think will sound a bit rich to its member countries.
And beyond all of that, James, just reflecting on Rubio's performance, 50 minutes in the spotlight with the world's media, even via screen from here in the Bureau, the atmosphere seemed different, more relaxed, a bit of back and forth with the journalists, lots of laughter as he got to grips with Caroline Leavitt's job.
He's comfortable in his own skin, isn't he? Quite the media performer, Rubio, in a way that J.D. Vance perhaps is not. Rubio's softer, measured, and he does carry a clout, I think.
Yeah, and there is some suggestion that J.D. Vance will have his turn at the podium too during Caroline Leavitt's absence.
Yeah, contrast and compare.
There has been this recurring meme, of course, of Marco Rubio wearing various costumes to perform different roles. It started when the president added National Security Advisor to his portfolio following the departure of Mike Waltz. Well, he's taken to this role rather well, I think, even answering one question in Spanish.
La política de Estados Unidos en ese tema no ha cambiado, y cuando cambie te dejaremos saber. The politics of the United States on that, the policy of the United States on that topic hasn't changed. When it does, obviously we'll inform you, but I don't have any news for you on that today. Right there in the green.
Yeah, it was quite the split screen. Rubio wooing the White House press corps with a bit of charm at the exact same time as his main presidential rival, the Vice President J.D. Vance. Well, he was boarding Air Force Two with one of his youngsters in tow, having voted in Cincinnati in the Ohio primaries. As he was doing that, the attention was all on Marco Rubio. The question, I suppose, in amongst us, certainly, White House watchers was, have we just watched the next president of the United States? Or certainly, is that Rubio throwing his hat into the ring? He was almost like a bit of the old Republican, and yet with some of the MAGA rhetoric packaged perhaps in a more palatable, digestible way for the wider electorate.
Yes, there were the quips, like when he joked that he'd lost the map of where the various correspondents sit in that room, and then talked about which correspondents he should ignore.
Are you guys all the TV people? Yeah. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go. I'm learning. They gave me a little map. I don't know where I put it of the people here. Some of you had like red X's. I'm kidding. No, that's not true. Go ahead.
Yeah, and he joked, didn't he? He said the press briefing was chaos.
This is chaos, guys. Go ahead.
He clearly seemed to enjoy his moment in the spotlight. For me, though, David, quite comfortable, center stage, and of course left the podium to the shouting of the dozens of reporters who wanted more.
Yes, it was refreshing in many ways to see how he engaged with the reporters in the room. We've become so used to a certain style, if I can put it like that, from Caroline Leavitt and Pete Hegseth, even President Trump himself. This was totally different today. And as for the substance of the matter, well, he did answer every question. That may seem a strange thing to say when you're talking about a press conference, and revealed that the current negotiations with Iran are over a general framework for further discussion about its nuclear program rather than a final agreement. That's much more than we'd heard from the president or from the defence secretary.
Yeah, Caroline Leavitt's very good at batting away any hint of controversy, isn't she? I think Rubio, he'll let us in rather more. There was certainly an answer that turned my head. He said that his wish, or America's wish, was for the Strait to go back to where it was. Now, critics, I think, would pounce on that and say, well, hang on a minute. The Strait of Hormuz was absolutely free for passage before you started your military action. So an invitation to the critics there, I thought. He highlighted the economic pain that he said Iran would suffer from America's blockade, which he dismissed the notion that was an act of war. I think highlighting the economic aspect of all of this is to highlight a strand that America thinks it can prosecute well in this conflict. But I think the striking thing is, David, at a time when we're all asking if and when America will escalate things militarily, go back to military action, I'm struck by the tone which has softened in the last 24, 36 hours for me, less belligerent, which, may be significant in terms of America, of where America intends to take this. Although with Donald Trump and his unpredictability, I wouldn't be placing any bets yet.
So a strong performance by Marco Rubio. It'll be interesting to see how the Vice President or other cabinet secretaries perform when it's their time to shine in this revamped version of The Apprentice at the White House.
So, David, we mentioned it at the top. The presidential physical fitness test is back. Donald Trump has been in the White House challenging kids, wait for it, to a fight.
Are you a strong person?
Yes, sir.
Good. You think you can take me in a fight? I think you could. Hey, that would be embarrassing, wouldn't it?
Can't help wondering how the president might have responded if the kid had replied, yeah, I think I could take you in a fight.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. Yeah, the kid to say, what, you want some?
But can you imagine, James, being ranked in your class at school based on your physical achievement? Because that's what this test is all about. Now, I imagine James Matthews would have been pushing to be top of the class.
David, I would have been wheezing away in the back row, trust me.
James, the only time I'd beat you in a race is to the pub.
I'll take that contest, David.
It's all part of Trump's Make America Healthy Again program, launched in tandem with RFK Jr., the health secretary. The move reintroduces a performance-based benchmark for student fitness. It was launched alongside sports stars like the golfer Bryson DeChambeau and baseball pitcher Noah Syndergaard.
Yeah, well done, David. Have you heard of either of those individuals?
Oh, DeChambeau, yes.
Oh, have you? Oh, well.
Not the picture. I was fascinated by how DeChambeau and the president both pronounced his name. It's DeChambeau, they say, which is certainly not the way I would have said it.
Oh, right. Never heard of either. But anyway, Obama, I've heard of him. He phased out the original fitness tests in his second term. Critics argued that it was too focused on performance and that it discouraged less athletic kids. Obama's subsequent programs were intended to tackle health over fitness. It's the age-old argument, not just here in the United States, isn't it, David? You know, to what extent do you reward youngsters who are physically capable? Big argument that says that's the way ahead. Clearly, the counter-argument was Obama's.
Yeah, the debate between athleticism and participation. But of course, there are many kids less physically able to take part in these kinds of sports.
Yeah.
Over 20% of American kids are classified as obese, and 7% of kids here seen as morbidly obese. So America does have a child health problem. But as I was watching the president putt golf balls with kids on the White House lawn, before teaching some other kids how to do the now famous Trump dance, I did wonder how much this test will actually shift the dial on the health crisis in the United States. Will a physical test and class rankings make any difference? I suppose it's anyone's guess.
David, we've had a question from Kelly, a Scot based in Zurich, Switzerland. Hi, Kelly. She asks, can we dig into the cognitive testing that Trump is being subjected to? He has increasingly rambled about them in his speeches, and yet the tests themselves sound pretty basic and potentially not cognitive tests. Kelly suggests that they are in fact dementia tests.
It's an interesting question, Kelly. Since the presidency of Joe Biden, there have been questions about how fit and well the incumbent in the White House is to execute the role of president. Remember, though, this period of history is unprecedented. The two oldest US presidents of all time, back to back. Now, during the Biden years, we had trips and slips that made the octogenarian appear increasingly frail. But there were verbal gaffes too, like when he accidentally introduced Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, as President Putin at the height of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway.
It's moments like those that eventually pushed Biden out of the race for re-election. And in stepped, you know who, Donald Trump.
Yeah, and what we've had since is a president who at least looks physically more mobile. Trump he's burlier, a stronger man for sure. But questions do linger over his sleep patterns, for one thing, and also the fact that he is an erratic individual in his behaviour and in his pronouncements. We've all seen the late night stream of consciousness on Truth Social, the dozens sometimes of posts into the small hours of the morning. We have also seen Trump occasionally close his eyes during long meetings on camera. The president and his allies, well, they say that he is just bored or just gets bored. That hasn't stopped concerns surrounding his age and health.
And the concerns around his age and health may be why he has spent considerable time talking up these three cognitive tests during his first and second terms. He says he aced them all. And he keeps telling us that no other president has ever subjected himself to three cognitive tests, which begs an obvious question. Why is the president having to take cognitive tests at all?
In my opinion, anybody running for president or vice president should take a cognitive test. And no president has ever taken one except me. I've taken 3 of them, and I've aced each one. 1 in the first administration, 2 over here. And whenever they get a little sassy, like, does he still have it? Does he still have what it takes? I say, all right, I'll take another one. And they are hard. There are many people in this room I know that are smart. They're not going to ace them. There are many people standing back there, the fake news media. I'd like to have them. You know, the first question is very easy, and they always show the first question is, you have a lion, a bear, an alligator, and what's another good? A squirrel, okay? Which is the squirrel? So they show that question, and then the first 4 or 5 questions they get a little more difficult. By the time you get to the middle, they're tough. By the time you get to the end, they're pretty hard. You got to be pretty sharp. But every time, so I've taken 3. No president, think of this, has ever taken 1. How do you think Biden would have done? I don't think, he might not have gotten that first question right. Anyway, and Obama would have done poorly. They would have done very poorly. But I think you should have it. As soon as they said that, they say, it's unconstitutional. And I said, why? They say it's unconstitutional to give a cognitive test like that. But Rick, I do it anytime they start getting a little sassy. And you know, it quiets them down for almost a year when they hear the result. One doctor said, it's the first time I've ever seen anyone get all questions right. That's a doctor who does this stuff for a living. And I did it 3 times. So I don't know. I think I'm done with those days. I'm tired of taking that test.
Yeah, David, these cognitive tests, they are a matter for the White House medical staff. We don't have access to the results or any of the detail. And we are left in a situation where we have to take Donald Trump's word for it. Kamala Harris, remember her, former vice president, wannabe president, beaten by Donald Trump in the last election, of course. Well, she's now got a Gen Z-focused X account. That account on Monday evening shared an example of what they say is a cognitive test similar to the ones Trump says he's taken. It includes questions like, and David, I'll put you to the test here. -7, 5 times from 100. We'll wait.
I don't understand the question. -7, 5 times from 100.
There goes your presidential bid, David.
Okay, you're asking me to take 35 from 100. Is that the question? Once I figured out the question, the answer is 65. But maths was never my strong point.
Go to the front of the class, David.
You have to draw a clock face to show 10 past 11 in another question. That's no mean feat for the digital world of today. But the test that Kamala Harris is referencing is designed to detect mild cognitive impairment and to assess short-term memory and attention and concentration. It's not clear if this is exactly the test Donald Trump took, but you could argue that what the president equates to an IQ test is more of a memory test. And that all comes as 59% of Americans say in a new poll that they do not believe the president has the mental acuity to serve as commander-in-chief.
Yeah, and that same poll by the Washington Post and ABC News, it's also found that 55% of Americans don't believe Trump is physically healthy enough to be the president either. That, despite Ronnie Jackson, his former White House doctor, apparently telling Trump that he could live to 200 years old if he stopped eating junk food.
But we'd have to change the name of the podcast then to Trump 200. Not that I envisage this president giving up his Big Mac anytime soon.
Now, David, we know that news breaks by the minute in this town. It's just broken on Truth Social. The president has posted, shall I read it to you?
Absolutely.
And this is coming fresh to both you and me. He says this, based on the request of Pakistan and other countries, the tremendous military success that we have had during the campaign against the country of Iran, and additionally, the fact that great progress has been made towards a complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran, we have mutually agreed that while the blockade will remain in full force and effect, Project Freedom, the movement of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, will be paused for a short period of time to see whether or not the agreement can be finalized and signed. President Donald J. Trump. So he is pausing Project Freedom, which essentially was this, and that's only 2 days old, a project to ensure safe passage. Pete Hegseth described it as a dome, but the blockade is remaining in force. So for me, it's a gesture to bring Iran to the table, but it's a gesture short of the blockade, and that's what Iran objects to as an act of war. America blockading Iranian ports. So quite how that is going to fly with the Iranians, I'm not entirely sure. But it's Trump reaching out to some degree.
And let's just compare those words with what we've been hearing today from Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio. Hegseth said the ceasefire remained intact and that they were now shifting their focus to Project Freedom. Marco Rubio said the war was over, Operation Epic Fury complete, because they were shifting their focus to Project Freedom. And now we have the Commander-in-Chief, President Trump himself, telling us that Project Freedom is paused. And all of that suggests America really has been backed into a corner, is desperate for an off-ramp and to see negotiations reach a conclusion.
It also reinforces the view that this is a president, quite literally, who doesn't know what he's doing in this conflict from one day to the next. Thank you very much indeed for listening and for watching. Stay healthy and do get in touch with us at the usual place, Trump100@sky.uk.
We'll be back on Friday. Bye-bye for now.
All the best.